Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about something that's invisible, weightless, and completely underrated: mental strength. You can't hold it, you can't see it, but if you don't have it, you probably won't survive in any real sense of the word. Image: it's 3:27 a.m., and I'm wide awake. My room is dark except for the dull glow of a streetlight bleeding through the blinds, casting long stripes across the ceiling. I can hear the hum of the fridge downstairs, the faint ticking of a wall clock, and my own heartbeat somewhere in my ears. I'm lying there, exhausted, but my mind's doing backflips. Past regrets, imagined failures, a future that feels like it's sneaking up on me wearing brass knuckles. Yeah, I've been here before. Too often. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Post your location and local time in the comments. I want to know if we're sharing this strange hour together. Now, let's get comfortable, and let's get started today. There's a certain heaviness that comes from feeling mentally weak, and it's not something people talk about until it's poeticized or turned into a TED Talk. But I want to tell you about the night I really realized, that my mind was the single most hostile environment I'd ever been trapped in. And I wasn't trapped there by anyone but myself. I was waking up from a dream I couldn't remember, heart racing like I'd been chased through it. The bed felt foreign, my sheets suffocating. Nothing actually bad was happening, and yet I felt like I was dying inside my skull. That's the curse of a high-functioning, anxious brain. It doesn't need real danger to go DEFCON 1. I used to think mental strength was just about powering through a breakup or bouncing back from a bad grade. But those are incidents. Moments. Mental strength is something else entirely. It's the stamina to show up again tomorrow, even if today broke you. It's refusing to believe the voice in your head that tells you you're not enough. Not by shouting it down, but by calmly proving it wrong. That night, I got out of bed, not because I felt better, but because I needed to prove to myself that I could. My knees cracked. The floor was freezing. I stood there, still half dreaming, and I realized that if I didn't start fighting back against the tyranny of my own thinking, I was going to live a very small, very tired life. There's an ongoing debate in cognitive science about whether our sense of self is continuous or reconstructed moment by moment. Some argue we're just stitching together memories to fake continuity. Others think there's a core, I, that's unchanging. On nights like that, I wasn't sure I had a core at all. I felt like a slideshow of disappointments on autoplay. I made tea, not for the caffeine, just for the routine. I stood at the counter, staring into the mug, and whispered something to myself I hadn't said in years. You're not going to break. I didn't believe it yet, but I said it again. Louder. Firmer. That became the first rule I ever gave myself. Don't let the mind go unguarded. If I was going to live in this head, I'd better redecorate. I started watching myself like a security camera. What triggered me? What drained me? What made me spiral? I wasn't judging, just observing. That's when the patterns started surfacing. My anxiety loved silence. My insecurity showed up strongest when I was alone. My self-doubt wore the costume of productivity. It whispered, "You're not doing enough." Even when I was burning out. Mental strength, I began to understand, isn't brute force. It's awareness. It's being able to say, I see you, thought #37B. You're the one that tells me I'm failing just because I took a nap. And then not obeying it. People often think the brain is like a machine. It processes, it reacts, it performs. But really, it's more like a garden. If you don't pull the weeds, they take over. And some of those weeds are planted by teachers, parents, ex-friends, internet trolls, or your own tired younger self who made a judgment in the 6th grade and never updated it. I didn't have a 5-step plan. I didn't journal under moonlight. I just took the trash out, poured my cold tea down the sink, and brushed my teeth like a warrior suiting up for battle. That was my win for the night. Mental strength isn't built in front of crowds. It's not measured by success or applause. It's measured by the silent victories, like getting out of bed at 3:27 a.m. when your brain is lying to you. And trust me, your brain lies. Mine does. It tells me I'll never be okay again, that everyone is ahead of me, that I'm too much or not enough, depending on the day, that I'm broken. But here's the thing about lying brains. They're not malicious. They're just scared. And scared things lash out. So I talk back now. I don't scream. I don't fight. I talk. Gently. Consistently. Like you'd talk to a dog that thinks thunder means the end of the world. It's okay. You're okay. We're safe. That's how it began. Not with motivation. Not with a Tony Robbins moment or a sudden breakthrough. Just one quiet, shaky night where I stood up instead of lying down. I chose discomfort over surrender. And I've been choosing it ever since. Pain isn't the problem. Our reaction to it is. I didn't get that at first. I thought pain was the problem. That it had to be avoided, numbed, solved. But that was before I learned to sit in it. Like, actually sit there, like a weird little monk in a burning room, and not run. One morning, a few weeks after that 3:27 a.m. epiphany, I was walking to the grocery store with headphones in, full hoodie up, trying to avoid eye contact with the sky. The weather was one of those cruel ones, gray but not romantic, chilly but not cold enough to wear something dramatic. Just irritating. I remember stepping off the curb and feeling this dull ache in my lower back, a leftover gift from an old deadlift PR I had no business attempting. I winced. Immediately, my mind jumped into that familiar spiral. You shouldn't have trained that day. You always push too hard. Now you'll never fix your posture. This is permanent. You idiot. Let me tell you something disturbing but true. Humans have evolved more brain space for imagining pain than for actually feeling it. That's why we can panic about a future injury before we've even stood up from the fall. We're built for predictive suffering. But that day, for some reason, I didn't spiral. I stopped on the sidewalk, pulled out my earbuds, and whispered out loud. Pain is pain. It's not a prophecy. A woman jogging past me gave me the strangest look. But I didn't care. That was the first time I realized my reaction to pain had been far more damaging than the actual sensation. There's this open academic debate about the pain matrix in the brain. Some scientists argue it's a distinct network for processing pain, while others believe pain is just a high-alert state filtered through emotion, memory, and fear. Either way, one thing's for sure. What we feel is rarely just now. It's the past yelling, watch out, and the future whispering, I told you so. I started noticing how often I recoiled from minor discomforts like they were bear traps. A stiff neck, an awkward silence, an unanswered text. Every little pang was met with a full psychological meltdown. And that's when it hit me. My real suffering wasn't from pain. It was from resistance. What if I started treating pain like that? Like a signal, not of doom, but of growth? So I didn't experiment. I stopped reacting. When something hurt, emotionally or physically, I leaned into it like I was leaning into a headwind. I didn't distract myself. I didn't reach for my phone or overthink it. I just let it happen. Like when someone close to me snapped at me during a phone call. Old me would have overanalyzed the tone, played back every word, then iced them out in the name of boundaries. New me? I felt the sting, breathed once, then asked, You okay? 9 times out of 10, it had nothing to do with me. Mental strength isn't just about grit. It's about interpretation. It's about becoming fluent in your inner language and refusing to translate every ache into catastrophe. There's this moment I'll never forget. I was at the dentist, no one's favorite place, and the hygienist was scraping away with that tiny hook of doom. I clenched. I flinched. And then I tried something. I imagined the pain as a color. Bright orange. Sharp. But just color. Not moral. Not scary. Just data. Weirdly, it worked. I didn't enjoy it, obviously. But I wasn't scared of it anymore. I didn't react. I just noticed. The next week, I tried that same approach on emotional pain. Someone I cared about didn't text back. My stomach twisted. My brain concocted 10 possible betrayals. Instead of feeding the fire, I labeled it, this is rejection anxiety. It feels like pressure in the chest. But I'm still here. I'm still breathing. That's when things started to shift. I stopped trying to avoid pain and started practicing my response to it. I became a kind of internal storm chaser, wading into the discomfort to see what was on the other side. I realized that much of my anxiety wasn't about reality. It was about my resistance to reality. Like the coffee spills, the friend forgets, the plan changes. None of it was fatal, but the mental tantrum I threw in response. That's what wrecked me. It's funny, mental strength is marketed like some hypermasculine drill sergeant thing. Push through. Don't cry. Conquer pain. But in my experience, true mental strength is soft. It's gentle. It's the voice that says, hey, you're in pain. That makes sense. Let's just sit with it for a bit. That voice became my new companion. I named it the calm one. It was the opposite of my inner critic. Where the critic screamed, this shouldn't be happening, the calm one whispered, But it is, and that's okay. Now, not every moment was graceful. There were nights I curled up like a shrimp under a blanket and ate cereal with my fingers. But even in those moments, I was watching myself, curious, not cruel. And when things hurt, I didn't dramatize. I didn't collapse into this always happens to me mode. I just said, this is pain, and I'm strong enough to feel it. It's wild how much changes when you stop running from discomfort. Relationships become simpler. Decisions get clearer. You stop catastrophizing your own emotions. You learn to trust your nervous system like a seasoned pilot trusts their instruments. Without panic, just presence. Now, do I still flinch when life punches me in the metaphorical kidney? Absolutely. But I recover faster. I don't confuse bruises for broken bones. And that, my friend, is the difference. The morning I snapped was not the kind of dramatic movie moment where someone throws a glass against the wall and delivers a life-altering monologue. No, it was slower, dumber. Just me, a toaster, and a slice of bread that refused to come out. I'd overslept. I was late. The shower was cold because I forgot to switch the heater on. I spilled toothpaste on a shirt that was already wrinkled. You know, the usual checklist of small indignities that cluster together like flies on a windshield. But then came the toaster. I pushed the lever. It jammed. I tried again. Jammed. On the third try, it just sparked a little and gave up completely. No heat. No click. Just the sound of my patience snapping like a twig in a hurricane. I lost it. Not with screaming. Worse, with that eerie, calm rage that bubbles up like lava through clenched teeth. I grabbed the toaster, walked to the sink, and muttered something only the dead could understand. I didn't smash it. I just stared at it like it had betrayed me personally. That was when I knew something was wrong. Not because of the toaster. Because I saw my own reflection in the kitchen window. And I didn't recognize the person staring back. Dark circles under my eyes. A jaw so tight it looked like I'd been chewing bricks in my sleep. A twitch in my left eyelid that had been going strong since, I don't know, the Industrial Revolution. That's when I heard the words echo in my head. You're not okay. And no one knows. Here's a human intelligence fact. Most people underestimate the internal emotional states of those around them. This is called the illusion of transparency, and it works both ways. I thought my pain was invisible, but I also assumed no one else could be suffering silently. I was wrong both times. I didn't call in sick. I didn't cancel the day. I got dressed, put on a clean, shirt, and left the house with a quiet fury humming in my bones. On the train, I stared out the window like a background character in a European art film. Not sad, just nothing. But when I got to work, it happened. I snapped again, this time out loud. Someone asked me a normal question. Something stupid like, hey, did you see the email about the Thursday meeting? And I just blurted out, what does it even matter? Silence. Awkward blinking. A few heads turned, and I immediately felt the heat creep up my neck. I'd never done that before, just cracked in public. No one said anything, but the energy shifted. I was officially that guy for the rest of the day. There's a popular phrase, don't bleed on people who didn't cut you. Well, I bled. A lot. And afterward, all I could think was, why couldn't I hold it together? That night, I sat on my couch, hoodie up again, lights off. I didn't even have the emotional range to cry. I just sat there in the hum of the refrigerator and thought about how fragile I'd become. Not in body, in identity. The core academic tension centers on emotional regulation. Are emotions meant to be mastered like tools or understood as vital experiences to be navigated? Psychology remains divided. But from where I stand, regulation without reflection is hollow. Suppressing anger doesn't equal resilience. It just delays the explosion. I wasn't angry about the email or the toaster. I was angry that I felt like a stranger in my own skin, that I'd been performing composure while quietly coming undone. That was the night I finally said it out loud. I need to rebuild from the inside. Not fix, not patch, rebuild. So I started small. I took inventory of my habits, not the obvious ones, but the tiny things I did on autopilot that shaped my internal world, like checking emails before even opening my eyes, or avoiding silence by playing podcasts nonstop, or pretending I didn't care when something bothered me, then resenting it later in passive-aggressive silence. I made a list, not to change everything overnight, but to see myself clearly. That's when I began to see how mental strength is not just something you have or don't have. It's sculpted, layer by layer, brick by quiet brick. The real shift came when I stopped trying to be impressive and started aiming for integrity. When I stopped caring how I looked to others and started listening to how I sounded to myself. Because let me tell you, no performance is worth the price of internal dissonance. There's a meme that floats around. Check on your strong friends. But what about checking yourself? Not in the mirror, in your mind. Ask, do I trust me right now? Do I even like who I've become when no one's looking? The morning I snapped wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. An ugly, inconvenient, poorly timed awakening, but an awakening nonetheless. I didn't suddenly become wise or calm after that, but I stopped pretending. I allowed myself to acknowledge that holding it together isn't strength if it's coming apart inside. That it's okay to not be okay and still function, but functioning isn't the goal. Alignment is. I started keeping a little post-it on my desk. It just said, "You're not angry, you're misaligned." It became my compass. Anytime I wanted to lash out, shut down, or ghost the world, I'd ask, what's not lining up here? It usually came down to this. I was betraying some part of myself, and my brain was sounding the alarm in the only language it knew: rage, fatigue, numbness. The morning I snapped didn't destroy me. It saved me. Because from that moment on, I refused to keep pretending that functioning in chaos was the same as living with strength. Discomfort is a decision. It sounds like something you'd find etched on a CrossFit wall next to a sweating gorilla, but I mean it differently. It's not that discomfort is optional. We're all going to feel it, but that how long we suffer from it is very much within our control. Let me tell you about the week I went full masochist with cold showers. It started with some random productivity podcast guy promising cellular rejuvenation and mental edge sharpening from subjecting yourself to sub-zero torture before breakfast. Of course, I took that literally and cranked the faucet until it cried Arctic. The first day, I screamed. Just full volume, primal, serial killer in the woods energy. I jumped out before my toes even got wet. The second day, I made it about 10 seconds. By the fourth day, I was talking to myself like a hostage negotiator. Okay, we're going to count to 5 and breathe. Then you can cry afterward, I promise. But something interesting happened around day 6. My reaction started changing. Not the temperature, it was still unforgivably cold, but my interpretation. It became familiar. I didn't love it, but I stopped recoiling from it. And that, weirdly, felt powerful. There's a human intelligence truth hidden in there. We adapt incredibly fast when the discomfort has purpose. Our brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex, starts rerouting associations when it senses consistent exposure with controlled outcome. Basically, if you show your brain you're choosing the pain, it backs off from sounding the alarm so loud. But that realization didn't just stay in the shower. It followed me out into my day. Like the time I missed the bus and had to walk 3 miles in dress shoes with rain in the forecast and a rapidly unraveling umbrella. Old me would have fumed, tweeted about it angrily, called the day cursed. But this new version, shivering and wet, just whispered, "We've survived worse." And I had. I'd survived anxiety attacks in bathroom stalls, silent treatments from people I loved, and lonely weekends so quiet I could hear my own disappointment echo. Compared to that, soggy socks were a joke. Discomfort is everywhere. But the mental drama we attach to it, that's self-authored. I spilled coffee on my laptop once and caught myself saying out loud, "Of course," as if the universe was punishing me personally through caffeine sabotage. But then I paused. What if it wasn't of course? What if it was just physics? A cup, a tilt, gravity. Boom. There's a weird and ongoing debate in psychology over whether humans are more affected by actual events or perceived ones. Some argue perception is reality, while others believe there's a shared, objective discomfort threshold we all carry. But my own data suggests this. The people who suffer less don't necessarily experience less pain. They just argue with it less. Want a strange fact? There's a species of frog in Africa called the hairy frog that literally breaks its own bones to produce claws when threatened. Imagine that. Its default reaction to danger is to snap its own fingers like Wolverine. Now that's a dramatic response to discomfort. I used to be like that frog. Minor threat? Snap. Someone didn't text back? Shatter. Traffic jam. Emotional femur crushed. But after the cold shower experiment, I began treating discomfort like a guest. Not a robber. Not a plague. Just someone unexpected knocking at the door. Sometimes annoying. Sometimes loud. But not evil. The thing is, most of us don't recognize when we're choosing to suffer. It becomes so automatic. You feel hungry at 4 p.m., and instead of just eating, you go into a mental monologue about discipline and failure. You feel tired, and instead of resting, you doom scroll while berating yourself for not finishing that email. So I made a new rule. Feel it, name it, move forward. Stub toe? That hurt. Okay. Not, why does this always happen to me? Friend cancels plans? I'm disappointed. That makes sense. Not, nobody cares about me. Cold shower? This is cold, but I'm in control. And let me tell you, that one phrase, I'm in control, became a kind of internal power switch. I even started challenging myself on purpose. I'd take the stairs, not for health, but to prove to my legs that discomfort wasn't the boss. I'd sit in silence at dinner with no background noise just to feel the awkward stillness and not flinch. I turned down dessert one night just because I wanted to prove that craving wasn't command. And no, this isn't some monk arc. I still binge snacks. I still scream into pillows sometimes. But now I know I'm doing it with awareness, not as a victim of some invisible force. A friend once told me, comfort is addictive because it's invisible. And they were right. You don't realize how deeply you've insulated yourself until you purposely take the insulation off. That's when you hear the world for what it is. Harsh, honest, loud, but also strangely beautiful. When you stop fighting discomfort, you start noticing things. Like the way your breath sounds when you're walking alone at night. Or how much better coffee tastes when your hands are cold. Or how proud you feel after doing something simple, like making your bed, when you really didn't want to. Discomfort stops being a signal of failure. It starts being a reminder, you're alive and you're growing. I don't fear bad days like I used to. Because now, when the bad stuff hits, the heartbreaks, the setbacks, the flat tires, I don't spiral. I anchor. I say, yep, it's cold, but I've been here before. And I'm stronger now. Motivation always betrays you. That was a painful truth to swallow, considering how many mornings I'd waited for it like some divine delivery service that never rang the doorbell. I used to think motivation was this mystical wind that would sweep me up and carry me through hard things with a smile on my face. But motivation is flaky. It's moody. It ghosts you on the days you need it most. Let me take you back to a Monday morning. I had everything set. Alarm at 6 o'clock, shoes by the door, a gym playlist already loaded. I even prepped my protein shake the night before like some overly ambitious gladiator. The alarm went off, I opened my eyes, and I stayed there. Not for a minute. For an hour. I had zero explanation. I wasn't tired. I wasn't sore. I just didn't feel like it. And that was the problem. You see, motivation is great when it's there. Like a good friend who shows up with snacks and playlists and says, let's crush this. But when it's gone, you're left standing in the rain with wet socks and no ride home. Relying on motivation is like trying to train a dog that only listens when it's in the mood. And unfortunately, my dog was asleep in the corner, drooling. There's a concept in neuroscience about dopamine and task anticipation. Essentially, your brain gets more reward chemicals from anticipating doing something than from actually doing it. So motivation tricks you. It gives you that, let's go, spark just from planning the thing, but then evaporates before you take action. It's a bait and switch of the highest order. That's why my whole plan collapsed. Because it was based on feeling like it. So I started making new rules. Ones that didn't care about my feelings. Rule 1. You don't have to feel like doing it. You just have to start. This became my go-to for everything. I'd whisper it to myself like a spell before workouts, writing sessions, even folding laundry. It wasn't sexy. It wasn't inspiring. But it worked. Because what I learned, again and again, is that action precedes motivation, not the other way around. There's still debate in psychology circles about what actually drives sustainable effort. Is it intrinsic rewards, like joy and curiosity, or extrinsic ones, like praise and money? The truth is probably somewhere in the messy middle. But for me, the only consistent driver became identity. I didn't act because I was motivated. I acted because I wanted to be someone who acts. That's when I created what I called my no-mood routine, a list of small, non-negotiable things I would do daily no matter what mood I was in. No adjustments, no debates, just execution. Wake up at the same time. Move my body for 15 minutes. Write for 20. Drink water before caffeine. One uncomfortable task before 10 a.m. Sounds simple, boring even, but it changed everything. Because those tiny acts built something more powerful than hype. Trust. I started trusting myself again. Not in an arrogant way, just in a quiet, reliable, I know I'll show up kind of way. The funny part? Once I stopped chasing motivation, it started showing up more often. Like some clingy ex who finally notices you've moved on. I'd be halfway through my boring routine when suddenly, bam, inspiration would strike. Not because I waited for it, but because I earned it. There's this mental strength in showing up when everything inside you says, why bother? I've had days where brushing my teeth felt like a mountain. But brushing them anyway? That's discipline. And discipline is what motivation pretends to be on Instagram. It's the difference between a wave and a tide. Motivation is the wave. It crashes, then disappears. Discipline? That's the tide. It moves everything over time, whether it feels exciting or not. One day, I had a full-blown meltdown over a spreadsheet. I kid you not. I sat on the floor staring at my laptop, genuinely questioning if I was cut out for life. Then I remembered, just do one cell. One. I filled in that one box. Then another. And another. 2 hours later, I had finished the entire sheet and was eating a sandwich like I hadn't just emotionally unraveled next to an Excel doc. The mind is dramatic, but it's also trainable. Motivation betrayed me, over and over. But in its absence, I found something better. A kind of slow-burning self-respect. A resilience that didn't need a pep talk. A daily grind that turned into something kind of sacred. And look, I still get pumped sometimes. I still have those lightning bolt moments where I'm like, let's do this. But now I treat those as bonuses, not lifelines. Because I know who I am when the hype dies down. I'm the guy who shows up anyway. And that's real power. The voices that whisper, quit, don't yell. That's the thing no one warns you about. They don't storm into your mind like sirens and explosions. They tiptoe in, polite and reasonable, offering you a warm drink and a way out. You're tired. Maybe take a break. You're probably not cut out for this. It's not quitting if you just pivot, right? These voices, they sound like you. They are you, in fact. That's what makes them so convincing. It started one night around 11:47 p.m. I was staring at my screen, working on a project that had already chewed me up for weeks. I was running on nothing but spite and caffeine, and I'd just hit another dead end. Code was breaking, ideas were clashing. The entire thing felt like dragging a piano uphill with a broken foot. That's when it crept in. You don't have to finish this. No one would blame you. It didn't sound malicious. It sounded kind, gentle, like someone tucking me in and saying, rest, champ. But here's the trick. Those voices don't want to help you. They want you to stop helping yourself. There's a psychological phenomenon called ego fatigue, the idea that our willpower, like a muscle, gets tired after prolonged exertion. That tiredness makes room for whispers. The mental immune system is weaker, and suddenly every intrusive thought gets VIP access. But here's where I flipped the script. I started talking back. I know, sounds a little unhinged. Me pacing around my room muttering, nice try, like I'm arguing with a ghost. But it worked. I stopped being the passive audience to my doubts and started being the heckler in the crowd. When the whisper said, what if you fail? I said, cool. Then I fail forward. So could I? The next day, I created what I call a mental descent protocol. Whenever a voice whispered, I had 3 steps. 1. Name the voice, give it a character. Mine was called Exit Eddie. He wore khakis and smelled like microwaved regret. 2. Respond out loud. Even a whisper back like, no thanks, Eddie. Change the power dynamic. 3. Act immediately, a small task. 1 sentence written. 1 rep lifted. 1 thing that made quitting irrelevant. The act of naming your quitting instinct externalizes it. Makes it manageable. Less divine truth, more annoying roommate. There's an open academic debate in the world of cognitive behavioral therapy. Is it better to reframe your thoughts or to detach from them entirely? Should you challenge the belief or just observe it and let it pass like weather? Personally, I'm team fire back. When the stakes are your future, silence is surrender. One afternoon I was supposed to record something, a small video script I'd written. I looked at the camera, hit record, and then immediately hit stop. 5 times. I hated how I looked, how I sounded, how my voice quivered on certain words. And right on cue, the voice said, maybe you're not meant for this. So I turned to the screen, deadpan, and said, then I guess we're both going to find out together. Recorded the video. Sent it. Cringed later. Grew from it. Every time I resisted the urge to quit, I felt a strange mix of fear and pride. Like balancing on a rooftop with the wind pushing hard and realizing you can steady yourself if you want to. But this isn't a fairy tale. Sometimes the voice wins. Sometimes I do quit. Like the time I signed up for a dance class thinking it'd be fun cardio and ended up leaving halfway through, drenched in sweat and embarrassment. The voice didn't even have to whisper that time. It just held the door open and bowed. But you know what? I still showed up again. To a different class. Different genre. Less pirouetting, more stomping. Still awkward. Still mine. Mental strength isn't about never hearing the whispers. It's about having a comeback ready. Because the voice of quit will always exist. But so will the voice of try again. And eventually, if you train it, that voice gets louder. More confident. Until it's not a whisper, it's a chorus. I have sticky notes in my workspace now. Not motivational posters. Those lost their effect after the third time I saw hang in there under a picture of a cat. These are direct messages to myself. One more rep. You're allowed to suck today. The goal is not quitting, not being brilliant. They're simple, but they remind me who's in charge when the whispers arrive. And sometimes, when the voice gets really clever, like when it tells me I'm just reevaluating my priorities or preserving my energy, I step outside. I move. I lift something heavy. Or write something terrible. Because doing something, anything, is how I kill the illusion that I'm helpless. Mental strength is not the absence of the quit voice. It's the resilience to not let it set the schedule. So next time you hear that seductive little whisper offering you an escape route, just smile and say, "Not today, Eddie. I've got things to ruin." Routine used to sound like a death sentence. The word felt beige, dull, like a series of empty actions on autopilot, stealing the thrill from life. But I was wrong. Routine isn't a cage, it's a cathedral, a sacred sequence of choices that keep the chaos outside, even when everything inside feels like it's about to shatter. Let me tell you about my morning ritual, the one that saved me, even though it bored me to tears at first. It started with 3 things. Wake up, drink water, stretch. That's it. Not inspirational. No candlelit journaling or interpretive sun salutations. Just painfully basic movement. At first, I hated it. My body felt like a brick of complaints. My brain screamed, "Why are we doing this? This won't fix your life." But I did it anyway. Not for results. For rhythm. That's when it clicked. Mental strength isn't a burst. It's a drumbeat. Here's a human intelligence fact for you. The brain has a mechanism called temporal binding. It links repeated actions in time to a sense of cohesion and identity. In short, habits make you feel real. When your actions form a rhythm, your sense of self stabilizes. That's why people who are grieving or depressed often say, "I don't feel like myself." Because without routines, we become mental static. So I leaned in. I turned my life into loops. I ate the same breakfast 5 days in a row. I walked the same path. I wrote at the same hour. My playlist stayed the same for weeks. I wasn't becoming a robot. I was building scaffolding. Of course, there were days I didn't want to follow through. When the bed was warm and the world too loud. That's when my rule kicked in. The ritual is the point. Not the result. Not the productivity. Just the act of showing up. And something magical started happening. Tasks that once felt heavy became automatic. Writing stopped being a struggle. My thoughts, once scattered like spilled nails, began lining up like soldiers. I didn't feel like I was constantly chasing myself through the day. I was ahead of it. There's an ongoing academic debate in the behavioral sciences about whether habits are better formed by discipline or identity. Do we build routines because we want to act differently, or because we want to be someone different? I used to think I needed to force change with willpower. But over time, I realized I was becoming someone new, not by thinking about it, but by living it repeatedly. Routine is a story you tell your nervous system, a message that says, "You're safe. You're capable. You have a plan." Want to hear something ridiculous? For 6 months straight, I used the same mug for my morning tea. Not because I was superstitious, but because it became part of the set list. That chipped mug was the soundcheck for the concert of my day. Now, I know someone reading this is thinking, but I thrive in spontaneity. Sure, we all love novelty. But novelty without structure becomes chaos. You can't riff on jazz if you never learned scales. You can't improvise life if you never showed up for practice. I stopped seeing routine as boring and started seeing it as reverent. A bow to the day, a nod to myself. Even brushing my teeth with intention became part of my mental armor. I'd stare at myself in the mirror, suds and all, and mutter, "This is who I am. This is how I show up." And no, it wasn't glamorous. Some days, the routine felt pointless, like I was folding laundry during an apocalypse. But that's exactly when it mattered most. During one particularly dark week, stress piling up, relationships strained, I thought about quitting everything. All the good habits. The writing, the gym, the cold showers, the whole charade. What saved me? Making my bed. That one, stupid, square of order in a chaotic room gave me the courage to keep breathing. Funny how that works. You know what else is weird? Sloths only poop once a week. And when they do, they climb down from the trees, slowly, dangerously, to do it on the ground. Why? No one knows for sure. But they keep doing it, predictably, with almost religious dedication. Even the laziest creature alive has a ritual. So what's your excuse? Routines aren't just for optimization. They're for sanity. They're the rails that keep your train from tipping off the track when life decides to get creative. The ritual doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to be yours. Mine? It evolved. I added deep breathing. I swapped stretching for a light jog. I even started whispering a phrase to myself before each shower. Be gentle, but don't be soft. I still don't fully know what that means, but it grounds me. It makes me feel real. People often chase motivation and discipline like it's some elusive dragon, but they miss the quiet magic of boring repetition. Mental strength isn't built in dramatic battles. It's built on boring Tuesdays where you do the thing anyway, where you light a candle not because it's special, but because it reminds you that you are. Routine gave me back my dignity. It gave me something to return to when the world went sideways. A small, sacred list of things I do, not to control the world, but to stay anchored when it spins. You want to feel strong? Start by doing the same 3 things every day, no matter what. Then watch your brain begin to trust you again. Fear of looking stupid nearly ruined my life. And I mean that literally. I avoided opportunities, relationships, entire careers, all because I didn't want to be seen fumbling. Not fail, fumble. There's a difference. You can fail gracefully. But fumbling? That's public. That's awkward. That's vulnerable in 4K resolution. Let me rewind. There was this open mic night. Small room, plastic chairs, low stage, exposed brick trying its best to feel cool. I'd written 3 minutes of spoken word poetry, rehearsed it to death in my bathroom. I'd even picked out a shirt that said, "I don't care," even though I very clearly did. I signed up. I was 3rd on the list. And then I left. Just stood up, mumbled something about needing fresh air, and ghosted the event entirely. That night, I stared at my popcorn ceiling and thought, this fear is stealing my life in installments. And it was. Psychologists call it evaluation apprehension, a fear of being judged that distorts performance. It's what makes your hands shake when you give a presentation or freeze up when someone watches you tie your shoes. And for years, I let that fear dictate the perimeter of my comfort zone. The irony? Everyone I admired was out there looking stupid, on purpose. They were trying, failing, tripping over sentences, bombing first drafts, but doing it loudly. I was in the shadows, perfectly composed, perfectly hidden, perfectly stuck. Odd fact, baby giraffes, when born, drop about 6 feet straight to the ground. No parachute, no warm welcome, just thud. Welcome to life. They stumble, fall, look incredibly awkward, and still figure out how to walk within an hour. Nobody shames the giraffe. But humans? We judge each other for blinking weird. I once skipped a salsa dance class because I imagined people watching me mess up the basic steps. Never mind that everyone was there to learn. In my mind, I'd already played out the movie where they pointed, laughed, posted me online, and I died alone. Ridiculous? Sure. Real? Very. So I started doing something radical. I began chasing situations where I knew I'd look stupid. I volunteered to read at a local story slam. Forgot half my words. Awkwardly laughed at my own jokes. No one booed. No one threw a tomato. One guy even said, "Hey, I liked that part about the astronaut. It was weird but cool." When? Next, I joined an improv group. Absolutely terrifying. I froze in my first scene. Literally stood still while my scene partner pretended we were skydiving. He shouted, "We're falling." I blinked and said, "I forgot my wallet." Not great. But everyone clapped anyway. Not because I was good, because I tried. That's when I realized something deeply freeing. Most people aren't watching you to judge. They're watching to see if they're allowed to try too. There's an ongoing academic debate about the spotlight effect, how much attention we actually draw versus how much we think we draw. The research leans toward this. We dramatically overestimate how much people notice our mistakes. Meaning, you could trip in a crowded street, and most people won't even flinch. They're too busy wondering if their own socks match. Once I absorbed that, I started collecting dignified fails. Tried to fix my own sink and flooded the kitchen. Wore mismatched shoes to a meeting. Posted a video with a typo in the title. Asked a question at a workshop and was completely off topic. Each one felt like an ego paper cut. But strangely, also like a breath of fresh air. Because here's the secret. Once you embrace looking stupid, you get to learn faster than anyone else. You ask more questions. You try more things. You're not paralyzed by needing to already be good. And suddenly, the people around you, they start to shift too. They become less guarded, less performative. They stumble with you, laugh with you, and connection happens. Real, raw, deliciously imperfect connection. One morning, I walked into a gym and asked how to use a barbell. The trainer looked surprised, maybe a little amused. But I said, I'm not pretending. I'd rather look dumb than lift wrong. He nodded, taught me everything. Now I lift better, stronger, and without the shoulder pain that came from years of prideful guesswork. Looking stupid stopped being something I feared. It became a compass. If something scared me because of how I might look, that meant it was probably worth doing. Because here's the thing. You can't grow if you're always curating. Curation is great for Instagram. Not so great for becoming a resilient human. There's a phrase I now live by. Be a beginner on purpose. Not just in new skills, but in conversations, relationships, even in how you see yourself. Drop the need to know everything. Wear the L on your forehead like a crown. So now, when I feel that panic, that tight-throated fear that someone might see me stumble, I ask, would I rather look smart or become smart? The answer is easy now. Mental strength isn't just stoicism or discipline. It's the courage to look dumb long enough to become great. So yeah, I may trip. I may mumble. I may say the wrong thing in front of the right people. But I'll be out there, stumbling forward, collecting awkward victories, and growing like hell. Training my mind like a muscle wasn't as simple as just reading self-help books and reciting mantras in the mirror. It wasn't about thinking positive thoughts or sending good vibes into the universe. No, it was about real training, the kind that gets uncomfortable, that makes you question your limits, that reveals just how weak you actually are before you can start getting stronger. It began with the gym. Oh, the gym. The place I'd spent years avoiding, convinced that my body was too soft to handle the intensity. I told myself that I'd get around to it after I hit a weight goal, after I learned how to eat perfectly, after I found the perfect playlist. The problem? I kept waiting for the perfect moment to start. And, of course, it never came. Eventually, I just walked in. I didn't care about looking good. I didn't care about being strong. I just showed up. And that, surprisingly, was the first and most important lesson. Showing up is half the battle. So I started lifting. And honestly, it sucked. My first set of squats felt like I was trying to push a broken-down car up a hill. My arms shook under a puny weight that my mind told me was too light to even bother with. But I kept going. Slowly, with shaky hands. Every rep felt like my body was refusing to cooperate. But after a few weeks, something changed. Not the weight I was lifting, not at first, but how I felt. I started to notice my thoughts more. Before I could lift, I had to think. I had to mentally prepare to get under the bar, take the strain, and hold it. Because if I doubted myself even for a second, I knew the bar would fall. That's when it clicked. The mind and body are not separate. They work together, or, in my case, they had been working against each other for years. To grow the muscle in my arms, I first had to grow the muscle in my mind. A fascinating truth from neuroscience. The brain is neuroplastic. It has the ability to adapt and rewire itself. This means mental toughness isn't fixed, it's trainable. By exposing your mind to controlled stress, persistence, and failure, you can reshape its capacity to endure and recover more effectively. But it wasn't just about lifting weights. It was about mental reps, training my mind to endure resistance, to sit in discomfort without the automatic reflex to escape. The true test of strength, I realized, was not in how much weight I could lift, but in how long I could stay with my discomfort without bailing. In the gym, this was easy to see. You just had to stay under the weight. Keep pressing, even when your body screamed, even when your mind told you, that's enough. You're done. I began applying this to everything. Stuck in a hard conversation? Just stay with it. Worried about a decision? Sit with the discomfort of indecision. Feeling overwhelmed by a task? Keep doing the next step, just one after the other. The more I trained my mind, the more I realized that every uncomfortable moment was just a rep, just another opportunity to grow. The voice that says, I can't do this, is just a weight to push against. And every time you resist that voice, it becomes weaker. But it wasn't always pretty. Some days, I felt like a mental marathoner crawling through mile 18, exhausted and questioning everything. On those days, I reminded myself that growth doesn't feel like growth. It feels like work. It's only in hindsight that we realize how far we've come. So I kept doing the reps, even when I wasn't seeing the results immediately. I also started noticing something else. The quieter I became inside, the stronger I felt outside. In the gym, in my work, in my relationships, I was starting to show up with more resilience, more steadiness, more confidence. Not because I had done more, but because I had learned how to stay calm in the storm. Here's where it gets tricky, though. There's an academic debate about whether mental toughness is a learned trait or an inherent quality. Some experts argue that it's all about developing skills over time, while others suggest it's about accessing latent genetic potential. What I've learned is this: whether it's nature or nurture, the work still falls on you. Mental strength isn't about waiting for an innate gift. It's about showing up every day and building it, one rep at a time. In my own life, this became a ritual. Not a ritual for the sake of routine, but as a process. Mental strength doesn't appear in a single day. It's cultivated over weeks, months, years. It's like farming. You plant the seed, water it, nurture it, and eventually, quietly, it begins to grow. The trick is this: you don't need to be the strongest in the room. You don't even need to be the most successful. But if you've trained your mind to endure the discomfort, to accept the challenge without crumbling, you've already won. The rest? It just follows. So I kept training. Not just the body, but the mind. Each time I resisted quitting, I built another brick. Every day I didn't give in, I added more weight to my mental gym. And eventually, it wasn't just about lifting heavier. It was about living stronger. Silence is a weapon. I know. It sounds like something a bad movie villain would say right before they tie you to a chair and start their monologue. But hear me out. Silence is the one thing that no one can take from you. It's the one area where you have absolute control, and the one area where most people, especially the loud ones, are terrified to venture. Let me set the scene. I used to be the guy who filled every awkward moment with noise. Conversations? I'd fill in the gaps with words, just to keep the flow. Meetings? I'd speak up to prove I was engaged, even when I had nothing important to say. Social events? I was the one making jokes at my own expense to make sure I was liked. I thought this made me approachable. I thought this made me visible. The truth? It made me invisible. It was the constant need for validation, the pressure to fill every silence with something, anything, that made me smaller. The truth is, we rarely let silence be. We either fear it or misinterpret it as awkward. But silence is powerful because it's the space where real thoughts, real ideas, and real self-reflection can grow. I first realized this when I started doing something uncomfortable. I stopped talking. Just stopped. At first, I didn't even know how to be in silence. It felt like a hole, like a missing piece in the soundtrack of my life. But then, as I got used to it, something incredible happened. I started listening. I started hearing things I hadn't heard before. My thoughts became clearer, more focused. I heard my own voice for the first time. Not the voice that filled the space, but the one that was just there, calmly observing. Research suggests that silence activates the brain's default mode network, the area that controls introspection, memory, and creativity. In silence, your brain starts doing the work of self-discovery. Without constant external noise, you start to process information differently. You can actually hear your own thoughts without the interference of chatter. Silence isn't empty, it's full of potential. So, I began to incorporate silence into my daily routine. In the mornings, Instead of turning on the TV or diving into social media, I just sat. 15 minutes. Nothing but the sound of my breath and the occasional rustle of trees outside my window. The first few sessions were awkward. I could feel the discomfort crawling under my skin. You should be doing something, my mind screamed. Don't waste time just sitting here. But over time, that silence became my weapon. I began to think more clearly. I began to see myself. Oddly enough, this isn't a new idea. Buddhists have been practicing the art of silence for centuries. They call it noble silence. It's not about avoiding communication. It's about using silence to deepen your understanding of the world and yourself. I wasn't practicing Buddhism, but the concept resonated. Silence was the key to unlocking clarity in my life. Our world thrives on noise. Social media is built on the noise of everyone's opinion. The workplace thrives on constant collaboration and loud meetings. We are bombarded with sound, with data, with messages every minute of the day. The irony? The loudest ones are often the least heard. The people who spend their time shouting tend to say the least of value. A friend of mine once said, "The loudest voice in the room is often the one least worth listening to." I didn't get it at the time. I thought it was just about dominance, about being the one everyone looks to for answers. But over time, I began to see that the true power lies in the quiet observer, the one who listens, who notices, who speaks only when necessary. This became a turning point for me in my career. I used to think I had to be constantly visible, speaking at every meeting, sharing my thoughts before someone could question them. But over time, I learned that silence can be the ultimate power move. I started taking a step back during meetings, letting other people speak first. And you know what? I started hearing things I hadn't heard before. I started seeing solutions, opportunities, and gaps in the conversation that others missed. Instead of being heard, I learned to listen. And in that listening, I found the real strength to contribute when it mattered most. One of the biggest things I learned through this practice of silence was that the world doesn't need more opinions. It needs more awareness. And awareness is born from silence. In those quiet moments, you begin to hear the world without judgment. You start to listen to your own gut. And when you speak, your words have weight. They don't just fill a void. They matter. Silence became my secret weapon. In a world that thrives on noise, being able to withdraw, reflect, and observe has given me more clarity than any opinion could ever offer. Now, when I feel overwhelmed, I don't reach for the next big thing. I sit in silence. I listen to myself. I listen to the world around me. And in that space, I found more answers than I ever could in the noise. Failure as a performance enhancer? Sounds like a contradiction, right? The word failure alone feels like a wet blanket. Heavy, suffocating. Who wants to fail? No one. But what if I told you that failure wasn't the end of the road, but the first lap? That every failure wasn't a sign of weakness, but a deliberate rep in building something stronger? I didn't get this at first. I thought failure was something to avoid at all costs. I thought it was a personal judgment, proof that I wasn't good enough. But I was wrong. It took one specific failure for me to finally get it. I was working on a project, and it was my baby, something I was really excited about. I poured weeks into it, staying up late, losing track of time, believing that this project was going to be my big breakthrough. When it was done, I hit send and waited for the validation to flood in. I was sure people would see how much effort I'd put in, how much better I had become since the last project. Instead, I got silence. Crickets. Not even constructive criticism. Just radio silence. I wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. This was my chance. I thought, why didn't it work? I spent days in a fog of self-doubt, playing the what went wrong game, until something finally clicked. Failure, in its purest form, isn't a judgment. It's feedback. It's a signal that something needs to be recalibrated, that something wasn't quite right, and that's okay. The issue wasn't that I had failed. It was that I thought failure was final, when in reality, it was just a part of the process. Statistically speaking, most successful entrepreneurs fail several times before they succeed. Even giants like Apple, Disney, and FedEx teetered on the edge of collapse early on. The takeaway? Endurance matters more than initial success. Those who keep iterating often outlast those who get it right the first time. This isn't just about entrepreneurship. This applies to every part of life. Whether you're trying to get in shape, start a new project, or learn a new skill, failure is part of the growth process. In fact, It might even be necessary. Just like muscles break down in the gym so they can rebuild stronger, your mental resilience grows with each failure, each mistake, each time you think you've hit rock bottom and realize, nope, you're still standing. Oddly enough, I discovered this principle in a completely non-glamorous setting, a cooking class. Yeah, you read that right. I took a basic cooking class to learn how to make pasta from scratch, thinking it would be a fun way to pass the time. But the first batch of dough? It was a disaster. The flour-to-water ratio was off. The texture was all wrong. I looked at the mess in front of me and thought, well, that's it. I'm terrible at cooking. I'm quitting. But then the instructor walked by, saw my panicked face, and said something simple. It's just dough. You mess up. You try again. That's how you learn. I didn't get it immediately, but I went back to work. And here's the thing. By the time that class ended, I was rolling dough and cutting pasta like a pro. The failure? It was necessary. Without it, I wouldn't have known what to adjust. It taught me how to read the dough, how to feel it in my hands, how to notice the texture before it was too late. The same principle applies to mental toughness. The first time you fail at something, it feels like the end of the world. You wonder if you're cut out for anything. But the more you fail and keep going, the more you realize that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a part of it. In fact, failure is a gift. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but the more you fail, the more you learn. It forces you to think critically, to evaluate your strategies, to refine your methods. Without failure, there's no feedback. There's no improvement. In my own journey, failure has been an excellent teacher. It's taught me humility. It's shown me where I need to grow. And, more importantly, it's given me the resilience to get back up again after falling flat on my face. You might be thinking, but it feels so bad. And yes, failure does feel awful. It stings. It hurts. But it's not about how bad it feels. It's about what you do with it. It's about acknowledging the failure, learning from it, and moving forward stronger than before. One of the most liberating things I've realized is that failure doesn't just teach you lessons. It reminds you that you're capable of moving through discomfort. It pushes you to the edge of your limits and shows you that those limits aren't as solid as they seemed. Once you realize that failure is simply a signal to adjust your course, it becomes less of an enemy and more of a mentor. Just like a hummingbird's heart beats up to 1,200 times per minute. If that bird ever hit a wall in its flight path, it would be a complete crash. But the point is, it doesn't stop flying. It adjusts its wings and keeps going, adapting to the wind, to the air currents. Hummingbirds don't learn to fly by avoiding crashes. They learn by flying through them. And that's how we learn, too. You'll fail. You'll get knocked down. It's inevitable. But the key isn't to avoid failure. It's to fail with purpose. Fail forward. Embrace failure as a tool for growth. And trust that with every failure, you're one step closer to achieving something greater. So, the next time you fail, don't beat yourself up. Don't treat it like a curse. Treat it like the beginning of the next chapter, one where you'll get stronger, wiser, and more capable. Failure is not your enemy. It's the training ground for success. The loneliness of real growth isn't romanticized the way we think it is. It's not some soul-searching journey where you emerge victorious on the other side, holding the key to all your problems. No, real growth is messy, awkward, and isolating in ways that feel like they're suffocating you. And yet, this loneliness isn't something to run from. It's the soil in which real strength grows. I first realized this when I started truly committing to personal development. I had this grand vision of becoming someone stronger, more disciplined, more focused, more successful. But the more I worked on my mental toughness, the more I realized how different I was becoming from the people around me. I wasn't doing anything extreme. I was just waking up earlier, exercising more, focusing on my goals. Small steps. But it started to make me feel like an outsider. Friends started asking me why I didn't go out as much, why I wasn't joining the usual group chats, why I was turning down invitations to social events. At first, I justified it by saying, I'm just working on myself. But slowly, I began to feel like an alien in my own life. It's not always a party. It's not a cheerleading session where everyone congratulates you for doing better. Real growth often involves leaving things behind. Old habits, toxic relationships, mindsets that keep you small. And that can be incredibly lonely. Here's a strange fact. Some species of trees, like the quaking aspen, grow in huge groves that are actually the same organism. Each tree is connected to the others through a massive root system. It's one of the oldest living organisms on Earth, yet each tree appears to be independent. Why? Because they're all connected, but they don't need each other to thrive. That's how I started thinking about growth. It's not about relying on other people's approval or company. It's about learning to grow independently while still being part of something bigger. When you're growing, it can feel like you're on an island. People don't understand why you're working so hard or why you're waking up early to read or train or sit in silence. They might even call you out for not being fun anymore. It's easy to feel like you're doing it wrong. But this loneliness isn't a sign you're losing your way. It's a sign you're on the right track. I started to question what I valued more: the comfort of being surrounded by people who didn't challenge me, or the discomfort of forging my own path. Let me tell you, the first option is easier. It's easy to slip back into old habits, to go out for drinks just because it's expected, to numb the discomfort of being different. But I realized that if I kept doing that, I would never become the person I was capable of being. That person wasn't hanging out at the bar on a Friday night. That person was in the gym, on the page, in the quiet, doing the hard work of becoming someone new. It wasn't easy, though. I missed out on things. I missed out on being in the loop, on the camaraderie, on the little moments that make you feel connected. I began to feel like an outsider in a world I had once been so immersed in. But I came to understand that this loneliness wasn't an accident. It was part of the process. To grow, you have to let go of certain things, and those things often include people. Not permanently, but temporarily. You'll go through periods where the people around you are not the ones you need to be with. Instead, you need to find yourself, find your own inner voice, and give it the space to speak. There's an ongoing academic debate about the relationship between personal growth and isolation. Some argue that isolation breeds creativity and strength, while others say it leads to depression and self-doubt. The truth is that both can be true. Isolation, when done consciously and with intention, helps you build mental resilience and clarity. But if isolation turns into loneliness because of self-imposed silence or disconnection, it can hurt your mental health. It's a fine line to walk. For me, the key was balance. I didn't cut off everyone. I didn't push people away in anger or frustration. But I learned to set boundaries with the people who didn't understand my growth process. I learned to say no. I learned to walk alone when I needed to. And I learned to value the peace that came with solitude. But here's the thing. It wasn't all about leaving people behind. It was about realizing that I wasn't alone, even when I was physically by myself. The truth is, we're all connected. We all share the same fundamental experience of being human, of wanting more, of struggling, of hoping, of falling short. The more I grew, the more I started to see the common threads in all of us. It was in the silence of my solitude that I began to hear other voices, not just my own, but the voices of people who had gone through the same things. I started to connect with people who understood what I was working toward. I found communities that valued growth, that respected boundaries, and that understood the importance of doing the hard work, even if it meant being quiet for a while. In some ways, I was never truly alone. I just needed to find the people who spoke the same language. Now, when I feel that loneliness creeping in, I don't shy away from it. I welcome it. I embrace it. Because I know it's a necessary part of the process. It's a sign that I'm shedding the old me and stepping into something new. And that's something worth being alone for. The loneliness of growth isn't a permanent state, it's just a phase. The quiet space between who you were and who you're becoming. And the beauty of that space is that it allows you to truly find your own voice, your own path, and your own sense of strength. Mental toughness isn't loud. It's not the flash of a neon sign or the pounding bass of a workout playlist. It's quiet. It's the stillness between your thoughts, the calm refusal to react, the gentle determination that gets you through the hardest moments without making a sound. I first noticed this when I started seeing the difference between loud strength and real strength. I had spent years believing that strength was about being the loudest in the room, the one who was always on, always visible, always pushing through. It was a performance, a constant show of power, like a lightsaber flickering in the darkness. But I learned something critical. True strength is the ability to stand firm when everything is falling apart, without needing to announce it. It happened one day, when everything I had been working on seemed to collapse. A major project at work failed. My closest relationships were tested. I got sick and had to cancel plans, which triggered a wave of self-doubt and guilt. I felt like I had hit a wall, and I started wondering if maybe, just maybe, I wasn't strong enough to keep going. But here's what I did. I sat in silence. I didn't text anyone. I didn't post anything on social media. I didn't seek validation. I just sat with the discomfort. And you know what? I survived. Not because I shouted about my struggles or posted about them for sympathy, but because I gave myself permission to feel without reacting. I gave myself permission to just be. I've come to realize that strength is not about being the loudest voice in the room. It's not about dominating a conversation or overpowering others with your will. It's about knowing when to stay silent, when to pause, when to let the storm rage around you while you stay grounded. That's where the true mental toughness lies. Here's a human intelligence fact. Cognitive dissonance is a psychological term for the tension we feel when we hold conflicting thoughts or beliefs. But one way to reduce cognitive dissonance is through emotional regulation, learning to stay grounded during moments of conflict. The ability to tolerate discomfort without reacting impulsively is a mental muscle that's built over time. I think this is the mental toughness we need. The ability to remain steady, even when everything inside you is screaming to react, to do something, to say something. It's the ability to stop yourself from spiraling. It's the quiet, persistent power that keeps you standing, even when the storm is relentless. Oddly enough, there's a creature that embodies this quiet strength, the octopus. Despite its reputation for being a creature of the deep, the octopus is incredibly adaptable and resilient. When threatened, it doesn't just fight, it disappears. It hides in plain sight, becoming part of its surroundings. It's not loud, it doesn't fight back aggressively. It simply waits until the moment is right. That's the power of quiet strength. In my own life, I began to practice this idea of quiet strength. I started removing myself from situations that didn't serve me, not by causing a scene, but by quietly stepping away. I stopped overexposing myself in relationships that drained me. I stopped speaking up just to be heard. I learned to say no, without guilt, to withdraw when I needed to, and to allow others the space to speak without feeling like I had to fill every gap with noise. When I started implementing this, I realized something incredible. Silence is more powerful than any word I could say. When I wasn't constantly trying to prove my strength, I became stronger. People started to notice a difference. I wasn't chasing their approval or clinging to validation. I was comfortable in my own skin, quietly moving forward. The trick is knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. Too many people think that silence is weakness, but silence is a form of control. It's knowing when to step back, when to gather your thoughts, and when to allow others to share the stage. When you stop performing your strength, you stop draining yourself. You start living it. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn was that being strong doesn't mean doing everything alone. It doesn't mean that you have to be the loudest or the most visible. It means that you are secure enough in yourself to not need the applause, to not need the constant validation from others. It means knowing that true strength is often shown in the quietest moments. It's when you feel the urge to explode, to scream, to make your point known, and you hold back. It's when the world around you is chaotic, and you don't let it rattle your center. That's where real power lies. There's an ongoing debate in psychology about whether introverts or extroverts are stronger mentally. Some studies suggest that introverts are more resilient because they spend more time reflecting and regulating their emotions, while extroverts tend to rely on external stimulation. But the truth is, both can be equally strong. It's not about how loud you are or how much you seek attention. It's about how well you can control your inner landscape and respond to the world around you without losing your core. True mental toughness, the kind that gets you through real challenges, isn't about keeping up appearances. It's about the moments when no one is watching, when no one expects anything from you, and yet you still show up. You keep going. You stay grounded. You stay quietly strong. So, next time you feel the urge to show everyone how tough you are, stop. Just breathe. Listen. And let your actions speak louder than your words ever could. Living below the noise isn't about detaching from the world. It's about choosing where to focus your energy. It's about recognizing that all the chaos around you, all the distractions, don't need to have the final say in how you live. You get to decide what enters your mental space and what stays outside. I didn't understand this concept for a long time. I thought that to be successful, I had to be plugged into everything. I had to keep up with the news, the trends, the gossip. I had to be involved in every conversation, every project, every decision. The more I engaged, the more I thought I was being productive. But what I was really doing was creating static, filling my life with unnecessary noise that clouded my clarity and drained my energy. It took one massive burnout for me to wake up. I was working nonstop, meeting after meeting, project after project, social event after social event. I felt important. I felt needed. But in the process, I lost touch with what actually mattered to me. My purpose got drowned out in the constant chatter. I wasn't living my life. I was living everyone else's. That's when I decided to pull back. I didn't quit everything overnight, but I started filtering the noise. I stopped attending events that didn't align with my goals. I muted the social media accounts that left me feeling anxious or inadequate. I made a pact with myself. I would only engage in what mattered. I would stop reacting to everything, stop absorbing everything. I would live below the noise. Living below the noise doesn't mean isolation. It means clarity. It means recognizing that not everything requires your input. Not every problem needs your solution, and not every conversation demands your attention. It's about choosing where to focus your mental energy and trusting that doing less actually means doing more. The human brain is wired to crave novelty. Dopamine, the brain's reward chemical, gets released when we encounter something new or unexpected. But here's the catch. The brain can't differentiate between useful and non-useful information. So, when you're bombarded by constant new inputs, whether it's social media, news, or random conversations, your brain gets overwhelmed. It gets distracted. It can't focus. The more you engage in constant novelty, the less your brain can retain and prioritize what's important. So I began making deliberate decisions about what I let in. I started reading more focused, quality content instead of skimming endless headlines. I spent more time talking to people who added value to my life, rather than being caught up in the noise of small talk. I turned off notifications on my phone and scheduled my time carefully, creating pockets of peace throughout the day where I could just be, without the constant tug of external demands. The results were slow at first. I didn't suddenly become a Zen master or a productivity machine. But over time, I noticed a profound shift. My thoughts became clearer. My decisions were easier to make. I stopped doubting myself in the same way. I stopped second-guessing my instincts and felt more in control of my life. I was living in alignment with what truly mattered to me. I wasn't reacting to every ripple of chaos. I was floating below it, allowing it to pass without dragging me with it. Oddly, this shift also allowed me to connect with people more deeply. When you're constantly distracted, you can't truly engage with others. You can't listen. You can't be present. But when you start living below the noise, your attention sharpens. You start hearing what people actually mean, not just the words they're saying. You start to see the world with more clarity and depth. And those connections? They're real, not distracted or shallow. This isn't a call for total withdrawal from the world, but a challenge to filter the noise and live intentionally. You don't have to be available for everything. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to be plugged into every conversation or every trend. Living below the noise is living on purpose. It's about finding your center, about focusing on what aligns with your values and your goals, and protecting that space from the distractions that would otherwise steal your peace. It's about saying, "No, I won't let this consume me," and choosing your energy carefully. Here's a funny thought. In the animal kingdom, certain birds practice what's called vigilant isolation. They will sit for hours, just observing, scanning for danger or opportunity, but not engaging in the chaos around them. They remain still, fully aware, but not caught up in the distractions. That's how I began to view my life. I wasn't checking out or disengaging. I was simply practicing vigilance, focused, alert, but not caught up in the noise. The real power of living below the noise isn't that you retreat. It's that you return stronger. You come back to the world with more clarity, more energy, more ability to make the right choices. You stop chasing every idea, every new trend, every conversation. You learn to listen, to observe, to choose what deserves your attention and what doesn't. I've learned that I don't need to be everywhere. I don't need to keep up with every latest development. I don't need to know every opinion. What I need is space. I need time to think, to grow, and to decide for myself what matters. Living below the noise is about finding your own rhythm, one that isn't dictated by the constant demands of the world around you. And once you find that rhythm, you become a force of nature, quiet, unstoppable, and perfectly in tune with who you are. Freedom is saying no without guilt. That's it. That's the core of it. It's not about saying yes to every opportunity, every social invitation, every new project that comes your way. It's about finding the strength to say no to what doesn't align with your purpose, your values, and your mental health. It's about knowing that your time, your energy, and your focus are limited, and choosing wisely where to invest them. I used to be the guy who said yes to everything. It felt good, didn't it? Being needed, being wanted. I was the go-to person, always willing to help, always available for that last-minute meeting, always the one who volunteered for extra work, even when I was already drowning. But the thing is, saying yes to everyone and everything eventually left me with nothing. No time for myself, no energy for my goals, no bandwidth for the things that truly mattered. I remember the first time I said no to something I really wanted to say yes to. It was a social event, an important one, with people I liked and respected. But I had a deadline. I had a project that required my full attention, and if I went out, I knew I'd be exhausted and distracted the next day. The pressure to go was intense. I thought I was letting people down. I thought I was missing out. I thought I'd disappoint everyone if I wasn't there. But I said no. And here's what happened. The world didn't end. The project got done. I felt proud of myself for making the responsible choice. And most importantly, I realized that my freedom wasn't dependent on pleasing everyone around me. It was about owning my choices, even the ones that disappointed others. It took me a long time to realize that saying no doesn't make you a bad person. In fact, it makes you a more whole person. It's a way of protecting your energy and ensuring that what you give to the world is authentic and intentional. It's the ultimate act of self-respect. Here's a human intelligence fact. Research has shown that when you say yes to everything, it can lead to burnout, decision fatigue, and resentment. Our brains only have so much capacity for decision-making, and constantly saying yes depletes that capacity. Saying no allows you to conserve mental energy, reduce stress, and focus on what's truly important. But saying no is hard, right? I get it. It feels uncomfortable. We don't want to let people down. We don't want to appear rude, unhelpful, or selfish. But here's what I've learned. The people who truly care about you will understand. The ones who don't, well, they'll figure it out. You can't please everyone, and that's okay. You're not responsible for the happiness of others. You're responsible for your own peace of mind. Oddly, I started feeling more empowered the more I said no. I started saying no to tasks that weren't in line with my goals. I said no to commitments that drained my energy. I said no to invitations that would pull me away from my purpose. And in doing so, I created space in my life for what truly mattered. Saying no doesn't mean you're shutting the door on people or opportunities. It means you're being intentional with your choices. You're acknowledging that your time is valuable and that it's okay to prioritize yourself and your well-being. It's the ultimate freedom to choose what serves you and what doesn't. There's an ongoing academic debate about the concept of boundaries in psychology. Some researchers argue that boundaries are critical for emotional well-being, while others believe they can be limiting and isolating. But for me, setting boundaries through saying no has been an essential part of maintaining my mental health and personal growth. By saying no to the wrong things, I'm able to say yes to the right ones. And that, in turn, opens up the freedom to focus on what truly matters. Saying no is not about being rude or selfish. It's about being self-aware. It's about knowing your limits and respecting them. It's about trusting that your time and energy are precious resources and that you don't need to give them away in order to prove your worth. Here's the thing. Once you start saying no, you'll find that people actually respect you more. Not because you're difficult, but because you're clear about your intentions and boundaries. They'll appreciate that you're not just a placeholder, a filler, or a convenience for their agendas. You'll be more present, more genuine, and more reliable because your focus is reserved for the things and people that truly align with your life. Funny story. I once said no to a project that I really didn't want to do, but I thought I could handle it anyway. After a few days of stress and frustration, I realized that saying no in the first place would have saved me so much time. The moral of the story? The power of no always outweighs the regret of a forced yes. So say no. Say no without guilt. Say no and be proud of it. Because every no you say is a step toward a more intentional life. A life where you don't bend to the will of others, but live according to your own terms. That's the freedom we all need. And it's yours for the taking.